All right, greetings, friends, and welcome to this episode of the Rob Breakenridge Show. So great to have you along with us. In this episode, a closer look at the upcoming Alberta referendum campaign, and not so much the 10 questions that will be on the ballot in October, but the 11th question that apparently will not be on the ballot in October. Now, for all the talk about citizens' initiative and all of these petition campaigns, it doesn't appear as though any of the questions on the ballot will actually be the result of a citizens' initiative campaign. 9 of the questions, of course, are questions that the Alberta government has decided they want on the ballot. The 10th, I think, arguably, is also a question that the Premier wants to make sure is on the ballot regarding separation or Alberta's place in Confederation. And yes, there were 2 petition campaigns. This question, though, is kind of a government-created mashup of those 2 questions. Neither the Forever Canadian group or the Stay Free Alberta group seems too happy about it. But that's the question that the Alberta government decided would be on the ballot. You know, the value of citizens' initiative is that it brings issues to the forefront that maybe otherwise the government wouldn't want to deal with. And I think you could say that about the Water Not Coal petition drive that's been spearheaded by Alberta country musician Corb Lund. Now, this is a petition that specifically seeks to ban coal mining in the eastern slopes of the Rockies. Now, you can go to waternotcoal.ca. This is the full question as they've written it. And this is the question that was attached to the petition that they've been gathering signatures on for the last few months. Now, coal policy has been really tricky and really controversial in Alberta going back to 2020 when the Alberta government very quietly rescinded the coal policy that had been there since the 1970s. There have been some various changes and flip-flops since then. You get the sense that the Alberta government wants to explore the idea of allowing these projects to go ahead at the very least. And I don't know that they want to go the route of this petition or be hamstrung by this petition. But I think there's some legitimate concern about the environmental impact of this kind of development, specifically the impact it would have on water. And I think that's where the concern has been raised by ranchers and others in rural Alberta who might otherwise be, I think, supporters of or sympathetic to the UCP. And I think that's another reason why the government has just kind of wanted this issue to go away. But this petition drive hasn't allowed them to make this issue go away. But even though now it appears the ballot, or rather the petitions have been submitted, they needed just under 178,000. According to Corb Lund, sounds like they got over 200,000. Those have been submitted. They're in the process of being counted and verified. But the Premier already indicating that this is not going to be on the ballot in October, regardless of whether they clear that threshold. This is what she said last week.
Well, I'll tell you a bit about the process that we have for citizen-initiated petitions is that they go before a legislative committee. So the Forever Canada petition went before a committee of MLAs, so it's both parties, and then they took hearings, got legal advice, and then made a determination about how to proceed with that. And so this particular legislative proposal will follow the same pathway, that it will go forward to a legislative committee that has to be assembled when we get back into the legislature in the fall, and then they'll decide what direction to take with it. There's some implications on private property rights that we would have to consider because we have legislation that requires compensation in the event that private property rights are taken away. There's an implication as well for the fact that there's already been a referendum locally on one of these projects. That will also have to be taken into consideration. And so I would be looking forward to seeing what the committee would come up with as they assess. There's multiple elements to this particular proposal, and it could result in a legislative proposal where we bring forward legislation into the legislature, or it could result in a recommendation for a province-wide vote, which would take place in October of 2027. We did receive notification from Elections Alberta that we had to have the final questions in by June the 1st in order for them to be able to prepare and hire enough people for the October 19th referendum. So this one came in a little bit late, and they still have to validate the signatures. So we're waiting for that validation process. But that would be the steps that would happen. The validation would occur starting in September. We'd put together a new legislative committee. There'd be various hearings and testimony that would be called before, and then they'll make a recommendation to the legislature about whether to proceed with a bill or whether to proceed with a referendum.
Okay, so the premier is saying some things there that she hasn't said before. In fact, in the past, on at least two occasions, she has outright stated that if this water not coal petition succeeds, in terms of getting the requisite number of signatures, it will be on the ballot. For example, here's what she said on April 23rd.
I think the deadline would be June 10th, because that's when Corb Lund's coal petition gets its signature requirements. So we have to wait and see whether he has the requisite number of signatures. And then there's a verification process, which I think with Forever Canada was actually quite quick. I think they were able to verify those signatures within 4 weeks. But I think with the signature collection period ending June 10th, by mid-July, we should know whether if those signatures are verified. That would kind of be the frame. I don't think there's no new petition that could start now that would be able to get on the ballot.
Okay, and 2 months before that, on February 20th, this is what the premier said.
However, there are a couple of citizen-initiated petitions out there, some of which will finish in time for that vote to be put on the ballot as well, if they get the requisite number of signatures and they're validated. So whether it's the independence petition or the coal petition, if they get the requisite number of signatures, our intention would be to put those on the ballot at the same time.
Okay, so same ballot, same day.
Yeah.
So there's two examples of what the premier has said publicly. According to Corb Lund, in a conversation they had, she also committed to him that if they got the signatures, she would put this on the ballot. Now she's saying there's not enough time to do so. It's also worth keeping in mind, by the way, that back in December, when the Alberta government changed the legislation yet again, the water not coal petition was canceled after having already received a green light, so they had to resubmit. So they had a delay of a few weeks. Had that not happened, they could have finished sooner and maybe beat this new deadline all of a sudden we're hearing about of June 1st. So joining us for more on this petition campaign, what went into it, what they're hoping to accomplish, and of course, what they make now of what the premier is saying and the likelihood that this question will not be on the ballot in October. We are very pleased to welcome back to the program Alberta singer-songwriter Corb Lund, who of course has been at the forefront of this debate for a number of years now. Again, waternotcoal.ca, that's the campaign website. You can also find Corb at corblund.com. Corb, great to have you back with us here.
Yeah, morning. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing good. So it's been kind of a whirlwind for you here the last couple of weeks. June 10th, you submitted these signatures to Elections Alberta. Now, before we talk about what the premier has said, has anything been conveyed to you personally, either from the government, from Elections Alberta, or anybody?
No communication, other than just the logistics of the counting process, because we have a scrutineer that we're allowed to have in there to oversee the count. Other than that, nothing. Like, do you want me to give you the timeline of how this thing happened?
Yeah, let's walk through that then.
Yeah, normally I kind of ad lib, but I wrote this down to make sure I get it right because it's a bit convoluted. So I met with the premier on May 11th to discuss the wording of the petition, and we were in. I was in a meeting room in the legislature building, face to face with Premier Smith, literally discussing the wording, how the question would appear on the referendum in October, pending our certification of our numbers. So 3 days after I met with Premier Smith on May 11th, the government reached out to Elections Alberta on May 14th to establish the last possible day on which an issue could be added to the ballot in October. I was not consulted regarding this inquiry, and I had no reason to believe any such cutoff date would be imposed, given that the referendum is more than 4 months away and there had never been a cutoff date mentioned ever. I've come to understand that the June 1st cutoff date was negotiated through conversations between the Premier, the Department of Justice, and Elections Alberta. I only learned of the June 1st cutoff date 16 days after it had passed on June 17th, when the Premier made those details public during a press conference. And to be clear, our deadline for submitting signatures was June 10th, and we met that deadline. No one from the Premier's office nor Elections Alberta informed us of the June 1st cutoff date. I learned of that date 2 weeks after the cutoff date had already passed, but the Premier had known since May 14th and didn't share that information with me or anyone that I know of until June 17th. And furthermore, if you recall, I don't know if everyone remembers all the details on this, but our initial Citizens Initiative petition was approved by Elections Alberta in December 2025, and we were underway for a few weeks. We had started to put our team together and get our canvassers sorted out, and the government inexplicably changed the rules in the middle of the game and retroactively canceled our previously approved petition and gave us, and so it took us 6 or 7 weeks to get through the process again. So had we not had it arbitrarily canceled and the rug pulled out from us the first time, we would have easily met the June 1st deadline. So there's a lot of weirdness around this thing. And there's never, as far as I know, been a deadline mentioned. And it just reflects the chaos and confusion and some would say favoritism involved in this whole process from the beginning. Not just the petition process, but the entire way this whole coal thing has been handled for 6 years. I've seen this for 6 years, flip-flops and confusion and vagueness and fingers on the scales. Anyway.
Well, and you can tell us more about what the Premier said to you, but I know that twice publicly at press conferences, when she was asked, she indicated that once she set this referendum date, if you guys got enough signatures, you would be on the ballot. So she said it publicly more than once.
Yeah.
What did she say to you?
Well, it was assumed because we were discussing the wording of the question on the petition. My ask for that day was that if and when we got our 178,000 signatures, that the Premier would honor our question and not tweak it, and she would use it verbatim because it was approved by Elections Alberta, and it will have been signed. The petition will have been signed by 200,000 plus Albertans, and by law, our canvassers have to read the question to the people signing it or have them read it as they're signing. So, I wanted an assurance from the Premier that she would honor the signatures of 200,000 people, Albertans, and not change the question. And most specifically, I'm 100% sure that the government would love to remove the Grassy Mountain project from our wording, but we specifically put it in there for very good reason. We spent a lot of time on our wording and have it worded in a very specific way. So my ask of her and the government that day was, please don't mess with our question if we get our signatures. The question of it being on the referendum was sort of a fait accompli. It was assumed because there had been no mention of any deadline, and the only mention that we had was the number of times that she said in the public that we would be on the ballot if we made our signature count by June 10th. So this is all news to me, and I'm, I keep having a hard time finding better words to use, but I'm disappointed, and I'm kind of furious about it on behalf of my team who just ran themselves ragged on this campaign. And more importantly, the thousands of canvassers that we had, and a lot of them are older people who spent 4 months in the sleet and the rain and the snow and Alberta weather and built, adjusted their lives around this thing to get these petitions, to get these signatures rather. And furthermore, same thing with the 200,000 people plus that signed it. Like, all of us were under the impression that we would be included in this slate of questions on the referendum in October. And, I understand the governments are shifty sometimes and politicians do this kind of stuff. I'm naive. This is not my business, but I'm shocked at the audaciousness of this 180. Like, it's really something.
Well, it is, and what seemed hypocritical to me, and I wrote this in my column too. When the Premier was upset about the court ruling on the separatists and how unfair it was, that all of those people had worked so hard and they'd been out gathering signatures, and that was what your team was doing. So the idea that she's concerned about one group and not concerned about the other, it seems like a lot of hypocrisy there.
Well, it is. It's We can say it politely, but what's going on is the government desperately wants these coal mines to go in. And, another thing that happened in our meeting that I was shocked by, and maybe I'm naive, but, the second thing we asked from the Premier, assuming we would be on the referendum, the main ask was, please don't mess with our question. The second one was, I requested to have as much editorial control over the framing of my question on the referendum website as the government has used on their 9 questions. And she looked me in the eye and said, well, we have a particular outcome we want for these questions, so we frame them a certain way. And it's like, I didn't know you're supposed to say that out loud. Like, I thought a referendum, the idea of a referendum was to gauge public opinion and act on that, since the premier and all of our ministers and all of the government representatives are our civic employees. Like, they're supposed to do what we want, and ostensibly, and in line with repeated heartfelt testimony by the premier in public about how much she believes in direct democracy, it's breathtakingly disingenuous to me. Because, yeah, like I say, I was concerned that the government would frame our question in a way that would lead people, that would put the finger on the scale. And I said, can we please have as much editorial control over our question as you have over yours? And she looked me right in the eye and said, no, we have particular outcomes we want from these questions, so we're framing them a certain way, and we'll do the same with yours. And I was like, what the hell? Like, I don't know if this is just hubris, or if it's living in a bubble to the extent that you forget what democracy is supposed to be, or what. But I'm just like, I was a bit of a cynic before I got involved in this stuff, but my Lord.
Yeah. Well, I guess, and that's been the point that's been put to the premier, is that she still has the power. She could say, put this question on the ballot. We want to make sure it's on that October 19th ballot. But I think there would be that temptation maybe for her to change the wording to kind of nudge it in a certain direction. Is that maybe part of what's holding her back here, do you think?
Well, what's holding her back is that I think the government's completely in bed with the Australian coal companies, and they don't want to stop the mines. That's what's going on. I mean, if you boil it right down to the raw power going on, I think that's what's happening. Because it's been clear to me for 6 years that the government desperately wants these mines to go in for whatever reason. I can't speculate on why that is, because it seems like a bad idea to me. Because, as I always say, I'm not partisan. I don't care about any of the parties. But I will say that not only 50% of the left-leaning part of the province is in favor of stopping these mines, a good chunk of the conservative base is too. And I've talked to a lot of conservatives who are also baffled about how much political capital these guys are spending on this. So I don't know if it's blind ideology or ignorance or graft or greed or some combination. There's no way for me to know that, but follow the money, they say, right?
Well, yeah, it is mysterious, but I get the sense you're right. I mean, I don't think the government wanted this to come forward. I think they would just as soon quietly go in the direction that they've been going for the past few years. This was inconvenient to them, which I guess is kind of the point of having these petitions, right? I mean, it gives citizens a chance to bring something forward that the government would just rather not deal with. So why bother having this law, I guess?
Yeah, like my approach to it is that I feel like whatever promises have been made behind the scenes without any mandate for the public to these foreign coal companies, the more noise Albertans make, the easier it is for the government to go to the coal companies and say, I know we promised you all these things, we made all these deals behind the scenes, but look out my window. There are people in the streets. So the louder Albertans are about this, the more cover it gives, the easier it makes it for the government to say no to these people. And, at this point, I don't have a lot of hope that our question is going to be on the October referendum, because she's said over and over it's not, basically, at this point. The most recent quote was basically, no, it's not going to be, as far as I know. But so my understanding of the law is the government, when presented with this is all assuming our signatures get verified, but upon receiving a successful citizens initiative petition, they have two options. They can put it to the referendum or after referendum, or they can pass legislation which does what we ask, which is to stop all coal mining and exploration activity in the eastern slopes, including Blackstone and Grassy Mountain. If the premier doesn't want to put it to a referendum, she should pass legislation that satisfies our question. And in the meantime, and this is key, we insist on a moratorium on all coal mining activities in those areas, including Grassy and Blackstone, because 200,000 people, they based the 178,000 number, the threshold, on 10% of the last election's voting public numbers. And so we got 200,000 something. So that's over 10%. That's no small thing. That's over 10% of the voting public have gone out of their house, gotten their vehicle, driven down to a canvassing station, had the question read to them, showed their ID, showed the proof of address, signed off on this thing. That's 10%. That's a lot, and they can't ignore this because, well, I mean, they can, but it might be at their own peril because the public, there's been all kinds of polling, and they talk about this this plebiscite they had within the municipality of Crow's Nest Pass, where they had a majority of people who wanted it, and the 200,000 people downstream were not asked, and the people in the nearby MD of Ranchlands, where the mine actually is, it's not actually footprinted in Crow's Nest Pass municipality. The Ranchlands people have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars fighting this, and they're unanimously against it. So their little 2,000 person plebiscite is propaganda. Ours is 200,000 people have signed off on the fact that they do not want these mines. And until this is resolved, the only fair thing to do is have a complete moratorium on these projects and exploration and permitting, in my opinion. That's what our ask is to the public.
Just how hard an endeavor this was, because that's a lot of signature. Right? These have to be gathered in person by scrutineers, witnessed, all of that. You're dealing with winter weather in Alberta, and you're dealing with an issue where there is, a need to sort of fight through a lot of the political noise, first of all, and everything else going on in Alberta, and kind of educate the public too around some of the issues here. So there's kind of that struggle in bringing the issue forward and getting out to all these people.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because it crosses political lines, and as everyone knows, things are so tribal in the world these days. If you say anything at all questioning industry, you're assumed to be some kind of extremist, left-wing extremist, and I'm not that. The people that brought me into this were ranching families with generational land that was going to be ruined, and there's been some right-wing publications that have tried to paint me as an NDP operative, and it's ridiculous. I don't like any of the parties. I've said a million times, my only concern here, I'm not making a buck off this. In fact, I'm losing a ton of money because I lost work and my whole life is around this thing now, which is fine. It's worth it. It's important. But, I'm not funded by anybody. And the only foreign money involved in this is the Australian coal companies. And I'm not a leftist. I'm not an urban extremist. I said it a million times, I come from 6 generations of agricultural Albertans. And my only concern here, my only upside is keeping the water clean and the ranch land intact. That's my only motivation. So stack that up against the other side. They've got a full PR thing in full swing now, telling us how great they are at being stewards of the environment and how it's going to save the Alberta economy and blah, 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 blah. But you have to consider the source. This is a billionaire foreign coal baron. And there's a ton of money at stake, and she's got high-powered lawyers, high-powered PR people, all who stand to make a lot of money. So who do you think's telling the truth? I got nothing to gain here.
Right. So moving forward here, I guess we really don't know what's going to happen. The Alberta legislature doesn't come back until October, which is right around when this would otherwise have been on the ballot. The premier's talked about, I guess, this committee would need to be struck. So what's your understanding of what might happen next year?
Well, obviously, the next hurdle, or it's not a hurdle really, but the next key point is within the next week or two, we should have our signatures verified, and then we can really push forward with. I think the next step has to be a moratorium on all these projects until we get this resolved, because this is no longer Corb, the guitar players, yelling into the clouds. This is 200,000 people, 200,000 Albertans who get off the couch, signed off on this thing. So this is no longer, and we followed all their rules. We jumped through all their hoops. We navigated all of the roadblocks they put in front of us, and they changed the rules to make it harder on proving addresses, and they canceled our first application. We've done everything we've asked. We've broken no rules. We've been fastidious about following all the guidelines. We haven't stolen the voter rolls.
No, right.
And again, my indignation on this is, some of it's personal because I've poured my life into this, but that's not the point. The point is my team and my thousands of canvassers and the 200,000 Albertans who all worked hard on this thing deserve fairness. And I've had a bunch of conservative people. Some of them even say, you know what, I don't even necessarily agree with you on the coal thing, but if you guys follow the rules and got the signatures, you should get a fair shake here. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, the more they screw with us, the more I dig my heels in. We're not going anywhere on this, anywhere, because it stinks. It stinks. It's crooked as hell.
Did you kind of feel or kind of hope that once you submitted those petitions, that it was kind of out of your hands, Albertans would have a say, and that in a way, it was almost like your work was done to some extent?
Well, I knew that it wasn't going to. I'm under no illusion that, if we got the signatures, or even if we win a referendum, that the government's going to go, oh, we're sorry, we had no idea. We'll fix it with proper legislation. They don't respond to that. The only thing they respond to is raw power, and that's social pressure, and that's, people in the streets. That's that's threatening individual. I don't mean threatening. I mean jeopardizing individual MLAs' seats by making the people in those ridings aware of the dangers of this coal mining and the crookedness behind it. And it's just a matter of applying pressure. That's the only thing they respond to. I'm under no illusion that they're going to give me a fair fight on this. We just have to force them through public pressure. And 4 years ago, when we first spoke out about Kenny rescinding the coal policy in 2020, there was an unprecedented outcry from Albertans across the political spectrum, urban, rural, First Nations, small towns, and it worked. Like, they put the coal policy back in place. They said, whoa, and they put it back in. Since then, they've nickeled and dimed it, and they've rewritten it, and they've loopholed it. So it's, they've defanged it. But it's proof that we can make a difference if we stick to our guns. And they've been working on something called CIMI, which is called the Coal Industry Modernization Initiative, which no one has asked for. From the beginning, we have asked for no more new coal mining in the Eastern Slopes, specifically in Grassy Mountain. That's key. No one has asked for a coal initiative or modernization initiative. Like, no one has asked for that. That's all government and industry. No Albertans have asked for that. We have asked for no more new coal mining in the Eastern Slopes. Full stop. Easy. Yeah, they try to make it complicated and they try to drag it. That's all we're asking for. And this whole thing about you asking me if my job was done, that's part of the plan, right? Like, they've got billions of dollars. They got deep pockets. They got lawyers. They got PRP. It's just me and a bunch of Albertans who care about this, a bunch of ranchers who brought me into this, who care about their ranch land and their water. It's part of their game plan to grind us down, right? And wear us down. And you can see it because we're fighting Grassy again. It was turned down by the provincial government, the federal government, the provincial courts of appeal. And it was a dead project. And then they loopholed it in again by saying it was an advanced project after they said that no more mines will be allowed except for advanced project. And magically, Grassy Mountain is now deemed through Brian Jean's machinations an advanced project. And here we are again, 3-4 years later, Albertans who have better things to do. My friends have cattle to raise. I got music to make. But here we are fighting the same foreign coal mine again. And it's like, how many times we got to say no to these people? They just don't get it through their skulls that we just don't want coal mines. It's very simple. And there's no subterfuge. There's no foreign influence. It's very simple. They just refuse to believe that Albertans maybe just don't want these mines. They think that we have to have an alternative motive. But we don't. We just don't want the mines.
So as you say, if the government was willing to actually put a moratorium in place, and even if this got on the ballot a year from now, maybe that would be a reasonable compromise. But as you say, we might see new legislation, we might see new policy, we might see new approvals before anything actually happens with this petition. Yeah,
that's why I'm insisting that Albertans insist that we have a full moratorium on all coal mine activity in the slopes until this is sorted out. Because again, this is no longer a few people in an activist group that don't like coal screaming. This is more than 10% of the voting public have said no.
So in the meantime, I guess we wait, right? We wait for, Elections Alberta is going to have something to say soon here, and then we'll see what the government decides to do.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is we're ready to really push this idea of Albertans asking for a full moratorium, but we're in case something weird happens with the count, which I don't anticipate, it would be very strange, but we're not fully diving into the media push until we're certified. But then you'll be hearing from us for sure.
All right. Well, much more. Again, waternotcoal.ca, corblund.com, of course, as well. I know you're busy on the other side of your career, so I look forward to more from you on that side too. Corb, I do appreciate making some time for us here, and we'll keep following this and see where it all goes from here.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk again. Thanks, Rob.
All right, so there you go. That is Corb Lund speaking about this Water Not Coal petition and the uncertainty it now faces as to what's going to happen come the fall. Doesn't sound like this is going to be on the ballot based on what the Premier said last week. I think if they really wanted to, I think the government could ensure that this be on the ballot in October. But again, I don't think they want to. I don't know if it's going to go away that easily, but again, it doesn't appear as though this is going to be something Albertans will be casting ballots on in October in the referendum on the 19th. So we'll see what Elections Alberta comes back with in terms of the verification. And I guess we'll need some definitive word from the Premier and an explanation, I think, as to why, despite what she has said in the past, that this won't be something Albertans will be voting on moving forward. And what does it say about the validity of citizens' initiative if even after having successfully completing a referendum or a petition campaign to force a referendum, you end up facing this kind of uncertainty, this kind of a situation? So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that this group has been jerked around this way. And again, if the government believes that this kind of development, these coal projects are that important, then make the case for that instead of going about this, in the way that they have in the past, quietly making these changes and sort of quietly trying to move these projects forward. So we'll see where this all goes from here. Again, waternotcoal.ca. You want to read more about the petition. Obviously, they're not taking signatures anymore, but I think the issue is still very much a live one. That's going to do it for this episode of the Rob Breakenridge Show. Really appreciate you joining us for this episode. You can find us, of course, on our YouTube channel, Rob Breakenridge Show, our website, robbreakenridge.ca, and you can listen to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and other podcast platforms. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend, folks, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care. Hey, folks, thanks for watching and listening. You can find us at robbreakenridge.ca. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button below and stay connected with the Rob Breakenridge Show.